guys. So my name is David Smooke. I started and run a company called Hacker Noon. We're trying to be the best place for tech professionals to publish. So we publish about 25 stories a day, ranging from software development, blockchain, crypto, and then general startups and how to build companies. We started on the blogging platform Medium, and then the business interest of us and them changed. So we raised money from our readership to build a small tech team and basically go from just, editorial content growth to now a software company essentially. So, 2 of our 4 full-time employees are software developers. And we're very close to launching our own platform. So we've kind of had a lot of, and before this we were bootstrapped, and I've always liked indie hackers and the idea that it doesn't matter how much money you raise, it's how good of a business you build, and businesses are built by making money, and you make money from your customers and you grow that way. So that's always kind of the direction I've come from. But now, I have a seed funding in the bank we raise money from 1,200 different people. So it's equity crowdfunding, which I think is a very good route for community-based business and media businesses specifically, because you have, a large community that wants this thing to continue to exist and get better. And, I'm just excited to spend some time and learn a little bit about everyone else's businesses today and share what I can to help.
Cool. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. So I am inviting our first guest up to the floor. I think his name is Chase. Chase, how's it going? Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you're up to?
Hey, Colin. What's up, dude?
Oh, I know Chase.
Okay, here we go. You have an insider connection going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so my name's Chase Beach. I live in San Francisco. So David and I actually used to live in the same building. So we used to play run hoops down at where was that? Joe DiMaggio. Yeah. So I actually moved. You're in Colorado, right?
Yeah. I moved to Colorado 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
That stuff.
Yeah, cool. So when I saw the email from Cortland Indie Hackers, and I saw you'd be doing this, I had to jump at the opportunity. So just cool to be catching up with you. But I've been working on a project for like probably 5 months now. And it kind of centers around accessing data that right now is very difficult, and it's in the insurance industry. And so my family's been in insurance since like 1876, and a big problem. And I grew up, my parents ran a small business. My mom, she sells car, and home insurance. My dad sells life insurance. And a big problem that she has is just getting information from consumers, right? If someone says I want to do business with you, and my mom's like, okay, we need to get your declaration pages. So basically the information on your insurance. And most people just don't know what it is. They don't know where it is. And a lot of times what people have to do is they have to contact their current insurance agent and have them send their declaration pages. And so I've been doing some kind of grassroots, going on Clement Street and different local brokers. And basically they're and saying I want to get an auto insurance policy. And they said, oh, well, what is your limit? What's your policy now? I'm like, I don't know. Can't you look at it? And I'm with State Farm now. They're like, no, that's State Farm's information. It's in State Farm's, silo. And I'm like, well, it's my policy.
Yeah.
Why can't I freely share it with, whoever I want? And, they're like, well, it can't be done. And so I'm working with one other who's a software engineer. I'm not on I'm not a developer. And, we're getting a lot of interest because people, a lot of brokers I talk to, and there's 40,000 in the country. They, half the time they get the information, half the time they don't. So, half the time they're guessing about what their policy information is. And then that whole process creates a lot of friction. And so, we're starting to build this out, but we're running into some walls, there's a lot of regulatory stuff. The product itself has to be very secure, and we're working on that. But I guess my question to you is how do you build interest before, really being able to launch this product? What would you kind of encourage me to do?
Well, content. I mean, content's how you can always build interest in a community before a thing exists,
Yeah.
And I don't know that much about insurance. I mean, one of the problems that was running through my head as you were describing it is the idea that you would go ask for your own policy from your insurance person or your State Farm or whoever. To them, it's a red flag that they're considering switching. So
Right.
the idea that you're trying to access your information, they're not going to be in a rush to give it to you. To
Right.
the person that wants to switch. And then they're also going to go out of their way probably to try and convince them to stay. Because now it's a red flag on their end. So that's a problem. That's like just when customers don't have access to their own data, that is a little disturbing. And then it gives the companies bad incentives to, not let to not encourage. So that's a pretty big battle. I would start with like, what terms are people searching? How to get my declaration, my insurance declaration, types of insurance declaration, life insurance declaration. So looking at those terms, and then you need key pages with those terms as your H1. And that they're either the title of the product page or the headline of the blog post, or, you have 5 blog posts that are around the 5 most common search terms there. So, I'm always been someone that looks at it more from a search point of view of you're in the weeds with this problem, and your family's been in insurance for 150 years, which is wild. There's going to be things that I'm sure dinner table conversations that you have that others in the space are trying to be pretty jealous or will be pretty jealous of. So, you can kind of trust your gut on the sense of content, and then how do you produce content with the least amount of effort?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a tough spot of do you do audio, do you do videos like this, and try and rank? I know there's real estate people here in Colorado that they can't really write or understand the internet. And then you see this older guy or girl, but they could talk for 10 minutes and they can give you good advice, about how to do real estate here. So there's different paths, it's all about how you can produce as much content as possible while, keeping yourself sane and actually growing your business and working on that side of it. That's kind of where but again, I don't know insurance very well. So
right. Yeah. So it's interesting. So if you have an online account, you can access the information very easily. But people just they don't want to go through that steps. It's like they don't want to look up the taxi cab number. They don't want to call a taxi cab. They want to just press Uber. And so basically that's what our software is doing. It's going and it's getting their credentials, on their behalf, and then bringing it onto our, our platform to give access to brokers.
That it makes a lot of sense to invest in making that transition smooth, and the amount of clicks they have to move their information onto your site, and then hopefully get a better plan or a better insurance provider. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question for you, David. You said that it's all about getting out as much content as possible, which is something you guys do at Hacker Noon. How do you look at the balance between content, quality, and quantity? If you're just one person trying to produce content, should you be I'm going to produce the perfect blog post this week? Or should you just be I'm getting 3 blog posts out this week, come hell or high water, I don't care how good they are?
I think it's an ebb and flow. 1 week you'll go for the home run, and then you'll do the home run and you'll get 100 reads and you'll be oh. But some part of it is also being smart. There's help section aspects to what you're talking about, and I'm building a help section now for Hacker Noon, so it's a little where my head's at. But there's just things you can have a good piece of content that doesn't take much work, because it's a very basic how to do this. 10 steps on how to make sure where your insurance declaration is, or there are simple ones that you don't have to write a lot. You don't have to write it in great detail. You just have to give something that's intermediate or basic level knowledge to you, because to the average person, they're introduced to a new thing and they don't care about their insurance, and they don't think about their insurance for most of the year. So, overall, I've been someone that, airs more. You need a lot of quantity in order to keep growing. There is figuring out how you can up the quantity while getting to a basic level is better than the perfect post. Because really, if you really want the perfect post, you should just quit your job and write a book and don't worry about the business itself. And the book is now the new business. That's the element of going for really, truly perfect text.
Right. And so you said a lot of quantity, but do you distribute that across a lot of channels, or do you try to find one where like, figure out where insurance brokers go and then just like plant yourself in there? Or do you want to kind of shotgun it?
I think each content, it can be looked at differently. I mean, if you want a certain thing to rank, you want to prioritize link backs. I mean, if you want to go after a certain community, like become really active in these insurance broker groups, and find the forums, find the LinkedIn groups, find the Facebook groups, and really, become someone that talks to all these insurance brokers. I mean, then your content is actually kind of community management, and you're producing all these short form comments and replying to other people's comment. That's content, that takes time to write and it takes time to engage with people. So like if the thing is only to interact with insurance brokers, maybe you don't have as much public content. You're just going into all these groups and spending all this time writing. So it's a trade-off, and it can be dangerous because you can suddenly go through a whole day and you didn't work on your product or your business at all, and you just talked on the internet, which like totally happened to me. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, I talked to some great people, but like my projects didn't move forward. I didn't do what I was supposed to, what I mapped out I was going to do. So it's you're never going to solve it. You want to find good channels that you trust, and you trust that whenever you spend time publishing there, it's worth it, and you see rewards back for your business. But you can't like say all my content goes here and that just solves the problem and I'm done.
Yeah. No, that's definitely, I mean, it's a good idea about the community of just kind of just asking questions and engaging in that way. And then from there, figuring out, what is worthwhile almost. Yeah.
I mean, you don't know until you try it. You just
right.
Don't.
Yeah. And then I guess my last question, I don't know if I'm good on time, Cortland, but, how do you, right now I got like, a couple of people interested, do I try to, get a beta going and have paying customers, or, do I just try to talk to as many people as possible? I've had like different people say different things. I mean, cause it's a side project, right now.
I mean, having a few people that really want the thing to exist and use it is better than a lot of people that are like, that's something to do with insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a balance of like, but if you don't want it to become a side project, you have to be realistic about how it can get to the point where it gets you enough money that it's not a side project. And if it's a side project, it doesn't mean it can't be successful, but it means it'll always be smaller than if you were 100% dedicated to it. If you're 100% dedicated to it and your time is your most valuable asset, you will make it bigger than if you're 50% of your time. So, I mean, I would be realistic about so you have two people working on it. How do I get enough money that we each can guarantee that we can work on this full time for 6 months? So like, whether ideally it's from the customer, but maybe it's not, maybe it's seed money, or maybe it's something. There's also, I mean, when I was growing Hacker Noon, I kept other contracts because it wasn't making enough money in the early days, and I kept writing for people. I kept growing people's sites and just walked this balance of like, what's the minimum amount of time I can work on other people's projects while working on mine the most, and just try and make mine take over because it's better. And that was like my, directive. Yeah. I mean, it was in the Vallejo days, so I was just becoming like the only thing. And even then, I think I still had a couple contracts to keep my salary like more reasonable through the ups and downs of, an early stage startup.
Yeah.
So pick that number and figure out how you're going to get that much money. That's kind of like my main advice. I mean, how many customers do you need at what price point to like make sure it's your full-time thing? Cause like it's your full-time thing. It's, I don't know. I'd rather work for myself.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's all I got. It was great catching up, man.
Cool. Good to see you, Chase. Thanks for jumping into this. It's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. It's a touching reunion between you two guys. Chase, thanks so much for coming on. Greg, I am promoting you to be a panelist so you can introduce yourself and let David know what you're working on.
Cool. Thanks, Cortland. Hey, David.
Hello.
All right. So my name's Greg, and I publish CoFounder Weekly, which is a newsletter that is essentially New Yorker for entrepreneurs. So we publish a weekly newsletter on Sundays with thought pieces about startup life. We have sections that are effectively recaps of the best of Twitter from the previous week. We are starting new series, like for example, we do like a day in the life of people who are founders, who are investors, who are doing interesting things, as well as weekly cartoons. It's informative yet silly and kind of like a take on the state of things in startups. So I would say about half our readers right now are founders. The other half are composed of investors, employees, generally, I would say startup enthusiasts. And I would say we've been at it for about 6 months. We've gotten really good feedback from our readers, good engagement, good responsiveness. And really what we're thinking through now is like, all right, what does the next step of this look like? Our readership is effectively linear. We did like a open startup post last week where we showed our readership, and it's like a straight line. So we're thinking about like creative ways in which we can grow the readership, grow engagement, and also structure or figure out ways to like better scale our content. We'll love, I guess, to start off by learning about in the early days of Hacker Noon, like how did you grow your readership? How did you think about that?
So I mean, we looked at what stories and people were trending and sent a lot of invites and looked at it more like a sales campaign.
Okay.
Like, hey, you own your content. You can also republish it here and get some more readers. And how do we reach out to as many people as possible? And how do we identify what type of people we want and what type of content we want? And the cool thing about content is you can see how people are reading it now. And then, when you get to a post on an independent site and you're like, holy shit, this is a good post. How
Mhm.
like hiding in the corner of the internet and like, so there's things about mine versus yours. I think we're a little more curation heavy and you're a little more creating original content, and we're a little more public and keep it out there, and you're more, it sounds like, on the newsletter side of things. So that makes the strategy a little different, because with us, we're always trying to give it away and have as little barrier as possible between the finding the content and consuming the content.
Yeah.
If you're having yours in a newsletter, someone has to give you information before consuming the content.
Mm-hmm.
So your whole challenge of dealing with readers is just a little different than mine. And do you publish, does all of your content live in the newsletter itself, or do you link to your site, and is the newsletter more curating your own content?
Yeah, good question. So currently all the content is published through the newsletter. We're in the process of creating like a dedicated site where you can access all the content. The other interesting thing, I guess, that we deal with, at least thus far, is all the content is pushed or published on Sunday. So it's kind of like this once a week ritualistic thing,
Like
which makes it kind of
times,
yeah, it's kind of fun in that way. It's like, I think that Sundays are this kind of fun, sacred day, day of reflection, a day of kind of thinking about big picture things. So I like that we're focusing on that day.
Have you taken a pretty close look at the hustle.co and Skim?
Yeah.
Studying their growth path is kind of interesting. I mean, the Hustle, to me, it seems like they're using the newsletter to sell ads and then basically run events. And it seems like the revenue is pretty split between newsletter ads and events. And newsletter ads, like, I've run some and it's okay. It's just, to me, I've noticed sponsors are too, like when you're top navigation on the site, sponsors have this PR value and they feel like more like they're newsy.
Yeah.
So, and then in the newsletter, I feel like the sponsors I've run into are a little too like, how much referral traffic did it get? That's the only metric.
Yeah. It's very transactional.
Yeah. So that can be, it makes sense. I mean, I get what they're saying. They're like, hey, you have a newsletter. Can I buy traffic from it?
Yeah.
That's like the core of what they're asking. And how are your sponsorship sales going?
We haven't monetized yet. We're just in the content creation sort of phase. And I would say, Frank, like, I'm unsure about the CPM sort of model, or CPM or referral model, based on the content that we create. Like, I feel like our tone is very fun and silly and yet also a bit informative. And so I feel like we'd have to really bring either the right partners on board or work with them in such a way that it's kind of a collaborative process, like collaborating on a cartoon, incorporating them into it or something like that,
Check out, I think it's the Marketunist.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so he'll do pretty good ads where he works with a brand sometimes, and it's still pretty cartoon.
Yeah.
And it's like, because there's a lot of things to make fun of that you also can advertise something.
Yeah.
How's the cartoon going? I always love cartoons.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I enjoy, I sometimes make them myself, but then also we're collaborating with other cartoonists as well. So I think there's an opportunity to really do more of that, because there just feels to be like a gap in the startup space. Like you have the Marketoonist, you have Scott Adams with Dilbert, you have like different business oriented cartoonists, you have XKCD, but I feel like there's this fun opportunity to kind of have a cartoon about a founder kind of going through the day-to-day ups and downs of startup life. And so
after this, I'm definitely checking out your cartoons. There is something to be, I think there should be cartoons that exist there, and making fun of Silicon Valley. I think there's a lot of funny jokes in Silicon Valley that like a good cartoon can come in and really capture.
Yeah, totally. Well, so I have another question for you around your own audience. So I would assume that there's different, let's call them personas or reader types that are interested in Hacker Noon. Maybe like a core reader, and then like like the more peripheral reader. And I'm curious, like how you think about the content that you're creating. Like, are you writing it specifically for the core? Like, how do you think about that?
So we ran a reader survey, and we've dug into like Alexa and SimilarWeb and those types of things to look at our readers. And, so over 40% of them have founded a company before, and over 50% of them hold cryptocurrency. So they're a reader base that's pretty forward thinking in tech. I mean, then you also think how readers get there, because we have a lot of long tail search terms. And so we've always kind of been very open with the engineer of like, hey, if you want to share how you built something, here's a place to do it. So, you can host your code on GitHub, but then you can tell the story of the software on Hacker Noon. So like how people get there, I'm fine if people come there once, have a transactional thing where they learn something and leave. So there's that type of reader that they get from search. We solve their problem. We create a positive brand relationship and impression, and then they run into us again later. But I mean, in terms of the buckets, it's software development is one of our big buckets. And then the cryptocurrency blockchain space is another big bucket. And then the general tech startup and startup culture type of bucket. And between those three, you can kind of move through about 85% of our content, and the other 15, as long as it ties to technology and it's a quality story, I'm open to it. So we're not setting out and saying this is the editorial line. We're saying this is what's worked well with our community. Hey, community, do you want to write more about stuff like that? So there's a lot of like, a lot of times the top stories of the week, it's the contributing writer that decides, and that's what they find interesting, and we trust them, and we make their story a little better, and we add a little distribution to it, and we keep moving forward. So, I mean, we're a very community-driven editorial line.
Yep, got it. Interesting. And I guess along those lines, then, how do you define community? Like then, like, is it the engagement that your readers have with the material? Are they contributing? Do you do any like user generated content from the readers themselves?
A lot of times readers become writers. Yeah. So we published 7,000-8,000 writers in that range. So we published a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions, and most of them have submitted because they've read the site before.
Yeah. And so how important is that for your own growth, having different writers that have their own maybe micro audiences, some of them probably larger? How important is that?
Very. Yeah. I mean, people, basically they bring in a portion of their community, and then we bring in a portion of our community. And the idea is to work together to drive readership.
Cool.
And the bigger we get, it's kind of like every time a new writer publishes, they benefit. Anytime a new blockchain writer publishes, they benefit from the 1,000 writers on the site that have already published about blockchain. Because now they build an audience for that interest group, and that content gets distributed to that interest group. So that's where it's a very positive network effect.
Yep. Cool. Makes sense.
And if you're interested in republishing any newsletters or cartoons on our site, and then having a call to action to subscribe to your newsletter, a lot of people are driving newsletters like that through us. So they'll just republish their newsletter, and sometimes they'll do it. Maybe they have a newsletter every week, and they republish a newsletter with us once a month. So it's another channel to get newsletter subscribers, and that's great for us. We want to bring in more content, and we want to benefit the contributors. And if the best way for some of them, the best way is to gather an email address.
All right, let's do it. Love
cool.
it. All right. Cool. Yeah. I mean, I think those are my main questions for you. I think that's all super interesting, helpful. Appreciate it.
Cool. I'm looking forward to checking out the cartoons. The rest
Cool.
of the stuff too, but mainly the cartoons.
Yeah, it's cofounder.substack.com.
Cool. I'll check it out.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks so much, Greg, for coming on. Next up, we have Harsh Goyal. Harsh, how's it going?
Hey,
I can't hear you. Can you hear him? We got no audio. You're not muted. I just don't hear. Well, now you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Okay, there we go.
I can hear you now.
Great. Hey, David, how's it going? So my name is Harsh. I run a website called Interview Camp. So it's essentially like an online boot camp for developers who want to interview at tech companies. And so they go through the website, they sign up. It's a paid product, and then there's content there they can look at, and then there's weekly kind of like meetings or lectures where they can learn stuff. So my question to you, generally, so it's just me right now, and it's like a stable business at this point, and I'm looking to build like a more content base, right? So what I wanted to learn was how the process worked for you, being just you at the beginning, and then transitioning to like maybe more people, scaling yourself out, I guess.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Especially how long have you been working on your own?
Almost 2 years, 1.5 years, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you definitely have to understand that like when you bring on more people, they're not going to do it as well as you at first, and they're also going to make choices that you have to understand, like let them fail or let them succeed, and accept that you could be right or wrong. So there's that like kind of emotional and expectation challenge to overcome. But then in scaling yourself, it's also a choice of like, what skills do you actually need? What type of person? So there's one thing of like, how can I get rid of all of the lowest level tasks off my plate so then I can do higher level tasks? And then there's another thing of like, how do I bring in a new skill set that can do higher level tasks that I can't do yet, or I may never be able to do? So that's a pretty big decision, for you to make and start mapping out, like looking at like, I would just start with a list of every single thing you can push onto somebody else, and then a list of like what kind of person you want. I mean, do you know if you want someone who's more going to build relationships with tech companies so you can place your candidates, or do you want someone who's more going to produce content? Do you know what type of person you want?
Yeah, the producing content kind of person, or something like managing a community of software engineers for interview related content, something like that, probably.
Yeah. So I mean, the other thing that you're going to have a challenge there, and you have to weigh them. And I would honestly start part-time, just from the sense of like because they're going to have to grow your voice. So their challenge is also like how much they can understand how you talk, and how much they can understand your worldview, and how much they can understand why your business fits in this market. And you know that, or you think you know that. And then their ability to speak for you is really what you're hiring them for. So that's a pretty tough challenge. I mean, have you engaged the community at all? Have you commissioned content, or have you got the user generated content and kind of looked at like, instead of having one person managing it yourself, kind of something that's part of your job?
No, it's just been me so far. Yeah, it's just been me.
And then what's the revenue model? Do you make money whenever they get it? Is it like a recruiting firm?
No, we sell annual subscriptions, so charge $250 right now for like 1 year's access.
Cool. I mean, recruiting is a funny space, like, because if you bring in a candidate, they could pay $250 for 4 years, and that's still $1,000. If they get one hire in those $1,000, they would pay the recruiter 15% of that 1 year's salary. Yeah,
it's a pretty cheap product right now.
Yeah. I would consider like not killing that product, but considering offering additional service. I mean, I would go further down trying to get those large checks, just in terms of like, because when you place a candidate, and then 3 months later they hit the cliff point, and then you're going to get a check. If you place a $200,000 candidate, you could get, a $30,000, $40,000 check pretty easily. And then it's like, that's a lot of $250 customers.
Yeah, definitely. I think my goal right now is to build more volume. and then with that audience that I have, maybe do something else with them. Maybe I have another service or something like that. But so my main goal right now is really to get more content out there, building more volume. And I noticed that Hacker Noon, you run on Medium, right? And you have your own domain. I think Medium nowadays, they don't allow your own domain from Medium publishers, right? Do you recommend having your own domain, or do you recommend using Medium as a publishing platform?
Definitely having your own domain. I mean, if I didn't have my own domain, I'd be truly screwed right now. Like that's empowering me to like rip out, the content management system of Medium. Other people that have put so much time, effort, resource, and links now going not to their domain. I mean, you want your links to go to your domain, and you want to continue to build, your authority over time. So not that you shouldn't publish on other people's sites, publishing on Medium is good for your SEO. Publishing on Hacker Noon is good for your SEO, but the core of your content and all of your library should be on your domain, and that should be your primary source. I mean, I think you also have an opportunity, with all these candidates to do more user-generated content. If they're looking for it. So you have one thing where it's like, you can have the people giving their experiences trying to get a new job in tech, and then you have the other side of it of trying to give advice for the interviews. Mm-hmm. And then you have your customers too, who like, hey, part of paying for this is you have to publish a post on your interview philosophy. And now you can get your customers generating content too. And your customers, because when they generate content, they're also telling the community and you what type of candidates they want and how they want to be treated in interviews.
So by now, customers, you mean companies?
Yeah. Okay. Like I would consider, like, as part of your onboarding experience, they have an option to publish posts on your site. And now you tell them, hey, by publishing a post, you're going to speak to the candidates, and you're like, are you hiding who the sponsors are or who the companies are on the site? Like,
I don't have any companies right now.
Oh, okay. So, but who you set them up with interviews, or you just coach them and they get their own interviews?
Just coach them and they get their own. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, coaching. I mean, it's kind of so you're basically at the core of it. You're selling, sponsor premium content and like coaching with you.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have a balance of like, how much content should I make free versus how much content do they need to get to pay you?
Right.
So you should also be looking for the moments of like, what is the conversion content? What is the content that like they need to pay you for? That's a thing. Like with all these paywall media companies, they're trying to figure it out at like a higher level of like, how much content do I tease? All right, do I do just the intro paragraph? Do I let you read a full article? Do I let you read a couple articles? So there's like, do you know at all like what the reason people pay you and what type of content makes them convert?
Yeah, so the main reason people pay is because all the content on the internet, most of it's not structured. So we just give like more of a structure and a community to go along with it. So the community is also paid. So one theory that I've been reading around the internet is that you give as much unstructured free content as possible, and then you charge for the structure, right? That's another. Do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe.
I mean, it's a little bit being a dick. Like, hey,
right.
The free content is all over the place, but I mean, I get the theory behind it, and it does make a lot of sense. Like having a guide, if you're going out into the woods, having a guide is really helpful. So you're paying for a guide, and part of that is in how the content matches. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it also gives you a lot of doorways. If you have a lot of free unstructured content, it gives a lot of ways for people to come in. And then once they come in, you want them to join the program, and the program part of it is organizing the content. Like I get the whole theory behind it. It's just, I mean, in general, I've always been someone that in the recruiting space, I think the companies should be the ones paying, and the companies have much bigger budgets, and capturing those budgets will make a better business than trying to get the candidates to pay small fees. So that's kind of like where I come from in my gut, but I get there's tons of candidates that need help, and there's so many candidates that are willing to pay for it, and that makes a lot of sense. And there's great businesses to be made there. It's just I've spent time in the recruiting space before, and my gut is more like the candidates should always be catered towards, and the candidates should get everything almost for free other than their time, and the companies are the ones that should hand over those credit cards.
I see. Yeah. Do you have any advice on how, because you have spent time in the recruiting space, like how to get companies to like notice your product and to start accepting candidates from you?
Yeah, it's because there's so many people trying to give them candidates, especially at the top tech companies. I mean, a lot of it, recruiting is a relationship business, and like having 100 recruiters that trust you, and internal recruiters, and keeping in touch with their careers, and then they move to an agency, then they move to an internal tech company, and like, so there is a very heavy relationship aspect to it, more so than other markets. But I mean, the most important thing is candidate quality. Like
Right.
if you're able to get a candidate to show up and they're great, they're going to come back to you, and they're going to keep wanting more candidates. So, but if you give them a bad candidate, you've wasted all this time to get them to take the meeting, then they get a bad candidate and they're like, you wasted my time, I'm not going to take your next candidate. So there's two things. I would say that the two core there is like, it's networking and relationship building with internal recruiting and internal recruiting departments. And then the second half of it is like, is your candidate quality high enough for that company that they want to take another meeting from you?
I see. So is building relationships with a lot of recruiters generally a good idea for this? Because a lot of them don't have decision-making like influence over what their department, who their department gives referral fees to, right?
Yeah, I don't know as much about that.
Okay.
I mean, I would say part of the challenge is getting their budget, and part of the challenge is getting a meeting and trusting that they'll meet with your candidate. If they meet with your candidate, like, so a lot of the other things will take care of themselves, in the sense, like, you're in a powerful position if like they're willing to spend time to meet with your candidates and they pick your candidate over other ones. Because there's the larger the company gets, the more it's like VP HR, head of talent acquisition, and recruiter doesn't actually control the budget, but the recruiter can always choose who they meet with, and they can always get a candidate and interview. Like I think that's pretty standard across most of these companies.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's really helpful advice. So I'm kind of curious, when you were just alone, who was like what role was your first hire? Like what did you hire first?
So I've always had a lot of part-time people working with me, and I've always, so part-time engineers, part-time writers, part-time growth people. But I mean, full-time, I was full-time, and then my wife Ling became full-time chief operating officer. So basically, a lot of her work was in sponsorships, leveling up the business, and then doing our equity crowdfund. And so, I mean, in a small company, to me, like, part of it is skills, part of it is just like who you can tolerate and who wants to do the work, because like in the beginning, like they're just going to be so all over the place. So one day you're building microsites, the next day you're pitching sponsorships, the next day, you're working on terms and conditions. It's like, to grow a company in the beginning, it's, they're all over the place. So I would look at them more like, are they very talented, and what's their work ethic, and what's your, if you're not bringing more out of each other, it won't work. Like, you each have to bring more out of each other in the early hires, and anyone that takes and pulls away from, making you a better person and making them a better person means their talent has externalities that are going to hurt the overall growth of the company. So I mean, you need to know what basic skills they have, but it's a lot more of chemistry than skills to like get more out of each other and have some exponential growth.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thanks a lot. I'll let other people ask questions now.
Cool. Good to meet you, Harsh.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Harsh. Next up, we have our final guest, William. William, once you get in here, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know what you're up to.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Hey David, hey Cortland, nice to chat with you guys. Thanks for taking the time, and hey everyone else listening. So a little bit about me. My name is William Wicky. I'm the director of product marketing and growth at Crowdbotics. Crowdbotics is seed stage company. It's about 2 years old. We're a remote company with a small office in Berkeley, about 15 full-time employees, large contractor network of developers. So essentially Crowdbotics helps you do two things. One, We have an app builder where developers can quickly scaffold and deploy apps with a variety of popular frameworks. You can deploy apps directly to GitHub. We create a repo for you and give you quality assured code and a ready to go backend based on kind of features you're trying to build with. The second part is that businesses or entrepreneurs who are not technical or just are strapped for time can get apps and software to market faster by building with our network of expert developers and PMs that we provide. Basically, you tell us what you want to build, PM manages the project, expert developers build by drawing from our library of quality assured software packages and blueprints. So the reusable components we have there allow us to build hopefully a little bit faster and more affordably than most other similar solutions. And businesses can also connect their app to CrowdBotix via GitHub and kind of raise their hand and say, I want to hire a developer on demand to tackle a certain issue, et cetera. So Medium has been a decent acquisition channel for us so far for both free users and customers. So I'd love to get your opinion, kind of, David, on some decisions I'm chewing on. We have 3 kinds of content. We do contributing posts and submissions from Medium writers and interesting writers writing about project management, development topics, even sort of indie hacker style topics. The second category is we pay writers and developers to build cool things on our platform and then kind of take the time to recap them. So specifically posts about building stuff on CrowdBotix. And then finally, it is our main blog, Medium is, for doing feature releases, use cases, interviews with customers, et cetera. So at this point, we're at a point where we kind of need to make some process changes to scale efficiently. I'm currently writing, editing, and managing 2 other editors. And this is just kind of one area for us. It's working, but I've got other stuff to kind of focus on in product and sales. So my first question is about the platform itself. You know, if I was starting from the ground up today, I may or may not choose to go with Medium for the publication, mainly because some relevant elements of our business strategy have changed. But nonetheless, Medium's still successfully driving free leads and customers. You know, we have the luxury of other channels working, even other channels working for SEO and not being specifically tied to a publication business model. But I'm curious, under what circumstances would you recommend transitioning a publication like ours or just a portion of the content to a self-hosted blog? And what factors would you consider in making that decision? And as sort of a tie into that, I'd be curious about getting your take on the pros and cons of Medium as a content marketing channel, just overall with the state of the platform.
Yeah, I mean, if you're producing all of that content and building all that community and paying for all this content and paying developers to build and talk about it, like, I mean, I think it all should be self-hosted in an ideal world. You know, why these solutions are very viable is they cut out a lot of labor, especially in the early days, you know, and so that's very helpful. It's very helpful that, you know, but the trade-off is, you know, you can't move where a button is. You can't change the way your email sign-up form is. You can't do all these things that are like very easy to do if it's your own self-hosted platform. So, I mean, it sounds like you guys are at the point where you're bringing in more to the platform than, you know, you're getting out of it. Sorry, I'm gonna turn off that. You know,
those balloons there the whole time behind you.
My bad, I didn't mute the home phone. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
It's fine.
I mean, overall content marketing, like, that's not really something from what I see that Medium really wants. And they used to want people to bring in all this great expertise from all over the internet. And now it seems like their model is more to have a paywall and have writers pay to read it and have readers paid to write it. So, you know, if you're not doing those things, they're going to be less friendly to you. So, but it doesn't mean it's not a place you can republish content, you know, because you have to look at how do you get link backs across the internet? What's your overall, you know, plan to have people discover your content? So the trade-offs between discoverability and control are never going to end. And it's always going to, whether it's you're putting out a tweet and you're frustrated that you want to edit it. You're frustrated how the link embed works. You know, if you're on Reddit, you're frustrated how the voting system works. But there's always, it's just never going to end. The trade-off between discoverability and choice. And, you know, on your own site, you're always going to have more choice, and you're probably, unless you figure out something really great, you're going to have less discoverability. You know, and even if you have it on your site and you have tons of traffic and people are coming and commenting all the time, there's still more ways you could be discovered by working with these larger sites and these larger social networks. So, I mean, it sounds like you're at the point where like you're putting a ton into the multiple editors, paying a lot of writers, where, you know, you should be, the root of your domain should be getting the most value from it. And you should be looking at the rest of the internet as just increasing your discoverability. You know, that's because you have a business interest here. You know, you want people to read the content and you want them to make a choice to try out your SDK kit or talk to a product manager and build their thing with us. And like, if you produce this great content that gets 100,000 reads, but only 4 leads because it's hard for the lead to gather from the great piece of content, was it really worth it to do that content? Like, was it a vanity metric to get the views and not really drive business value? And then, I mean, you definitely just want to weigh how much you're putting into all this content versus how much you're getting out of it. And you want to always value content as a long game, you know, and building your library has aggregate effects, but it also, like, you know, you're putting a lot into software you don't control. So, you know, your conversion is always going to take a hit there because other people are running conversions on top of your content. You know, create a Medium account or follow anything else, or if you're trying to do work on any of these social networks, you create a lot of content for the social net, or you create a lot of accounts for the social network itself.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, you mentioned the real benefits that we're enjoying at the moment, and they're kind of reaching up, you know, that breaking point. Discoverability is big, but so is the labor savings and just kind of like the simplicity of the workflow. And then also the ability to onboard contributors. You know, part of the role of one of the editors I have is, you know, finding posts and soliciting people, say, hey, you know, this is a good fit for us. Can we, you know, tweak it, add it to publication? If I was to, you know, make that transition, what kind of approach would you take in, you know, going from Medium to a self-hosted publication? Would you kind of make a clean break? Would you manually copy some of the content and start, you know, creating posts sort of with backdated, you know, backdates on it? You know, from sort of like a workflow and technology perspective, what would you kind of consider in making that transition?
Well, I don't know enough about your business to say how you should do it. I mean, how other people are doing it, you know, WordPress, Ghost, there's definitely some great options out there, you know, how to just move it over. I mean, the approach I took was much different, of like, hey, I was over reliant on this workflow. There's a lot of problems with this workflow for how I do business. I want to build from scratch now. And now we're in a spot where we're able to do that. You know, so we're building a top Firebase, and that cuts out a lot of DevOps works, but we're building a lot. You know, there's a lot of management, there's a lot of workflow between the editor and the writer that we're not doing on site now that we want to do. So, you know, we went with a much deeper, longer process than, you know, is probably necessary for you.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it's a matter of what team what skill sets your team has, how large of a project you want to make it. You know, and how are you backing up your content now? I mean, backing up content is like kind of essential in today's world, in my opinion. You know, relying on these social networks to control your content, and I just don't think it's that smart. So, you know, in terms of making the transition, it's also how well have you prepared that a transition may happen in the future, you know, so you can find yourself over reliant. I mean, it's been Firebase. I mean, it cuts out a ton of DevOps works, and it is and then you're already with Google, so authentication is simpler, and, you know, the managing of the user accounts and having our own database is like going very well. But I mean, the simplest way I've seen smaller sites do it is, you know, WordPress, Ghost, and just like, you know, treat it like a migration. You may want to look at signal versus noise. So they were one of the largest. They're one where they're large, and it's not very contributor driven. So it's more like the company is publishing. It's more of a company blog, more like your situation. Although you do have contributors, but the company content is probably the most important. So, I mean, they did a really nice WordPress design and WordPress transition and just exported their content and, went from there. They did lose all their comments on their blog, which was kind of sad because, I mean, their posts were great and they inspired a lot of people to write responses. And now, the responses aren't at the end of the post. So it's kind of a situation where everybody loses. But I mean, for you guys, I would just, I don't know, you guys are putting a lot into content. So I would say, your infrastructure should match your efforts and you should own more of it.
Yeah, that's all kind of the direction I'm heading. It's definitely like daunting to think about starting over or, the process of just migration. We've got a decent amount of resources, but it's a small operation over here and a lot of it's kind of on me. But I think I'm sort of leaning that way. So I think we might just have to take the plunge.
It's going to be a long road, but it's like, that's kind of how tech works. Like suddenly you're introduced to something new and it's like, oh shit, I have to start back at ground zero.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I would steer into it and embrace it as much as you can. It's there's nothing wrong with doing the exact same thing again, a little better.
Yeah. My second question would be kind of just getting a window into your overall workflow, especially early on when you were going from, yourself and an editor. You mentioned earlier that you had like a couple part-time volunteers, to, I guess, beyond that stage into a bit more scale. What were the things you prioritized when you were going from one editor to many, and specifically in terms of internal processes? Like, what were the things that you were hoping to optimize for as you're adding more people into the process?
Well, the early people, I mean, they weren't volunteers. It was all equity, cash, or both. So, it's aligning interests helps people do better work. So, I mean, that's important. But in terms of, I wanted to try and give them as much freedom as possible. With the editors we've onboarded, they have, they're reviewing stories by the tag of the story. So, we're trying to say, hey, more about blockchain, you only review blockchain stories. You know more about Bitcoin, you only review Bitcoin stories. You're a software developer, you know more about software development, you only review software development stories. So there was definitely, the area I want to get to is a lot more of this subject matter expertise is how publishing is determined. And it's not about formatting or grammar or style guides. It's about, hey, I'm an expert in this, so I'm going to help more people publish in this. So that's kind of like the direction I want to go, where there could be 1,000 editors, on Hacker Noon that are all something, they have tag specific expertise that they've proven that they can have that expertise and publish that way. So that's more of how I see the future. I mean, the past, increasing the rate of publishing is kind of a simple way to look at it. How many posts are you publishing? How could you double that? Just think about that problem in your head. Like, what could you do? Do you want to open up republishing partnerships? Do you want to change the job of the editor? Do you want to make it easier for the writer to publish? Do you want to make it easier for the writer to bring in their past content? Do you want to require all of your contractors that are building on your SDK that they have to publish a blog post about it? There's areas where you can integrate into your business. I would just say increasing the rate of publishing quality stories is kind of a pretty simple way to grow a site.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that sort of model, finding experts and elevating them as opposed to finding people who might write topics you think are going to be good and then, mold them to your editorial standards, using those editors kind of as, people finding talent and engaging those experts. So I think that's one of the reasons you guys are super successful, that mentality.
Thanks. I mean, and one other little hack you could consider is interviews. So interviewing experts is another way to get the expertise with a little less work on the expert's behalf. And that's, something that is worth considering. We're doing more of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, looking forward to seeing a lot more of those. I'll let some other folks jump in, and I typed out a couple of these questions, so I'll post some TLDR info about what we just talked about in the chat, so people watching can look at it. But I appreciate the time. Big
Cool.
help.
Hope it was helpful.
Yeah,
Good to meet
it
you.
definitely was. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks so much, William. And you're the last person. It's been almost exactly 1 hour. Thanks a ton, David, for coming on. I think what you guys are doing at Hacker News is super cool. How's it going, by the way? You've got this grand plan to sort of have, thousands of editors who are tagged. You were talking to me about this last year. How's the progress?
Progress is good. I mean, so now we're, playing with our product and moving it around and trying to figure out how to improve the communication between editors and writers, and just have having more control over curation is really exciting. Because how do you group stories together? How it's like sounds simple, but it's really not. So there's a lot of fun challenges there. And so we're a remote team. The chief product officer's in San Francisco, full stack developer in Detroit, and then me and my wife Ling here in Colorado. And then we got about 10 part-time people, upping editorial staff, upping front end and design. So and it's it's a little squad. So it's been a little different of okay, David, whenever you're a one person independent business, you really truly are an individual contributor. And then you look at how to be individual contributor and leader, which is now my job's changed a good bit. So that part of it, I'm still trying to mature, learn, and get better at. And it's a pretty tough shift to go from all editorial content growth to software company. And there's so many moments that I have strong opinions on software, but that doesn't really mean they're right. So there's that balance of building your own software for the sake of it versus okay, let's see how people like it, and then let's see how they react, and let's make a choice, and let's move forward. And so I mean, all in all, it's been an up and down, but an exciting time, and we have So I'm
exciting, man.
Figuring it out just like everybody else. There's no
you got the squad.
The master plan is subject to change.
Yeah, man, I've done a lot in the last, I would say, year or so of building some of the right things, some of the wrong things. I had some pretty strong convictions about what I wanted to do with the Indie Hackers Forum that I ended up reverting a lot of it.
What was the biggest thing you were wrong about?
I was really focused on making Indie Hackers more. I really wanted people to feel more comfortable making quick, short posts on the website, but I think it's not a thing that people really want to do. I think they want to be more thoughtful when they're posting about their businesses. It's a big hurdle for people to get over. It's never going to be like Twitter, where people are just firing off, oh, here's my business advice, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm going in sort of the opposite direction now, where I'm testing out more structured categories and kind of you've got your discourse, right? You've got your community that I came on yesterday and did an AMA with you guys, and discourse is very structured. Here's the category that your post fits under. I think that might fit really well with people making posts about their startups and their businesses, and also sort of nudge people in the right direction, because I think it's difficult to even know what kind of things you can ask. I don't think people are used to coming on office hours calls like this. I don't think people are used to going online and talking about their business plans and practices and strategies that they've always kept private. And so when they are greeted with this empty text box and it's just say your thing, they're just I don't know what to say. And so I think having categories up front will be interesting. We'll see how people react to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's good to admit when you're wrong.
Oh yeah, man, I'm wrong every week.
More short form posts, they can do short form.
Yeah. What I used to do is I would be when I would feel so strongly convicted about something, and other people would always disagree with me. This is when I'm always wrong. I would just put a poll on Twitter, because it's I know I'm wrong, but I just need to see it in the numbers. And every poll I've ever done on Twitter is 95% one way, 5% the thing that I like. I was going through all my old polls. They're all a landslide. So that's my.
If that's a good way to do democracy within a company. If there's ever a dispute, post it on Twitter and get a vote on it, and hey, we're just gonna adhere to the vote of the community and move on. And, I haven't gone full. It seems a little chaos,
But it's chaos.
Forget our decision making and let's just post a poll and see what happens. But I have been considering it. I mean, it's cool to think about how the community shapes the product and what you decide to do. because we're now going to come out with some stronger opinions with our new software. And, I'm sure we'll pull back from some of them, and some of them will go, much further into it. So, I mean, it's basically, I make a decision, but at the end of the day, like, the community will decide, and how the numbers perform will decide what the site actually does.
Yep. I mean, we both got content/community sites, because you guys are building out your community more than I've ever seen in the past. And it's like the community and the readers really do decide. Like, you can't do things that they don't like, because it'll show up in the numbers, and you've got to go back. So there's always that sort of boundary.
Piss them off sometimes a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
You can't like fully adhere to their demands. Then you're like getting blackmailed all the time.
That's pretty much it. Well, anyway, I'm gonna let you go, David. We should do this more often. It's fun to catch up. Maybe next time, if you do another office hours or I do one, like, you'll have to come on. We'll spend like 10 minutes just talking.
Cool. Happy to.
All right, later, David. Thanks so much.
See ya. Bye, Cortland.